And we're off to the races.
Once again.
Yes. You know, I don't know what nerve we struck last week, but apparently it was perhaps a bit of a raw one. We had some pretty good metrics, I understand.
Yes, we did. We had most people tuning in and downloading ever.
Wow.
By 1,000%. Frankly, I don't know what it was, but that was the Broken Canada edition. It's the name we gave it. I don't know. We'll give this one today. Actually, you're the one who named it.
Yeah, I think this is the visual, whether we believe it or not, the historical day, maybe the historical week that Canada became the Third World Banana Republic.
That's a long title.
I know, but I don't know how we could shorten that down. But that really is what it is. We've got a government in power that is doing everything it can to maintain power, including trying to poach people to cross the floor, which it's been done 167 times or something since Confederation. So
really.
Well, apparently something came across the flyby news and said this is not new. It's been 167 of them have done it since Canada became a country in 1867.
Now
I'm not going to fact check that. It just sounds like an interesting number. And you have to keep in mind here, folks, that they want a majority government because many of the Liberal MPs have come out and said, it's the Conservatives are stalling us to get our programs through. So if you give them a majority government, do we not slip away from a democracy into a dictatorship or a fascist state, or I don't know what you want to call it, but
well, that's ridiculous on its face. But 100. Well, we'll have to fact check that. But the parliamentary system we have in Canada is kind of an aberration of the real parliamentary system to begin with, because it has so many differences from the original setup of Parliament, which goes back to England and the English parliamentary system, which is far more dynamic in a way than ours is, because ours has a combination of parts to it over the years that has made it kind of a hybrid that isn't really a hybrid, but makes it a kind of a unwieldy thing. I mean, if you look at the fact that the real parliament in the UK, going back to the very beginning, had a House of Lords attached to it. We invented a Senate attached to it. Well, the House of Lords in the mother of parliaments has a very different reason for existing than our Senate does. Our Senate is nothing more than a dumping ground, a sinecure for whoever is in power at the time to fill these so-called positions up. What does they call it? The
sober House second thought.
Yes. Well, it's
which
more
is
like
hard to do. Yeah.
It's more like the house of your second check, really. As far as
house of the second check. It's also the house of the alarm clock to wake them up half the time. But anyway, just a quick point here. According to a quick internet check,
yes,
Canada Politics, more than 300 MPs have crossed the floor in Parliament since Confederation.
Wow.
So this is not new, folks. It's just becoming a bit more distasteful, I think now.
Well, maybe it was always distasteful, but this seems to be corrupt, or maybe it was always corrupt. I mean, look, I've seen a lot of people on social media say, well, if you're going to cross the floor, your seat should then automatically be vacant, and there should be a by-election called. And that seems to be the cleanest way in which to deal with that, because if I voted for you and you decided that you're not going to represent the views that I voted for, by putting you, and then you have no business representing me anymore in that
Well,
riding.
there's that, yeah. That and then the other issue that came up is that his constituency,
You're talking about the guy in
they,
Edmonton.
any Edmonton, you know, Terrebonne, well, not Terrebonne, that was the Supreme Court ruling, but the guy in Toronto, Ma,
Yes,
and the guy down east, whatever his name was.
forgettable.
What do you do with the money that was collected in his constituency when he was a conservative? Should he not have to pay that money back? He's not a conservative. He crossed the floor. Basically, what you're bordering on, if not theft, at least misrepresentation of funds.
Well, as I said on our X account, if you're going to be running a corrupt, unethical government, there's nothing wrong with doing what you're doing. And the three scumbags, and I will call them that have done this. You know, I would say to the liberals, if there's any honest liberals in the House, good, you know, have at it, because you got three guys that are going to be albatrosses around your neck when it comes down to the final analysis. If you trust these three, you are dumber than I thought you were.
Well, I guess it's also now, you know, the talk of a snap spring election might not need to be held if he can manage to garner. He's still going to have 3 by-elections anyway.
They're not guaranteed.
But well, I know 2 of them are in supposedly safe liberal ridings.
I keep
But
telling you, a black swan event can change all this.
well, that's true. But you know, you said, and I guess to me is the question is now in Edmonton, Outremont, wherever this guy, you know, Swan River, Swan Lake, whatever it was that he represented.
Swan Lake.
You know, is he going to be your pick for the Liberal candidate in the next federal election? And what do you tell the guy that he ran against? You know, the checks in the mail. Of course, I'll love you in the morning and all those other big lies.
Right.
What are you going to do with these people? Like Michael Ma, he's not going to be the conservative candidate in the next election.
The disturbing thing for me on certainly the guy, the Ma and the Genru, or whatever the hell his name is, from Edmonton, is that they seem to have one thing in common, and that is that they have close ties with the CPP or the PRC, or however you want to name Chinese links. And I am starting to I'm very much convinced that there are elements within the Liberal Party, and probably the 11 MPs that we kept talking about a year ago, are those folks who we've had some serious questions about their loyalties to Canada.
Yeah.
Now, the slide towards the PRC kind of management of the country has been evident since 2015. You know, one of the things that I brought up in our pre-production, when I wrote for our blocks, I said that we're sliding from maple syrup socialism into full-on Marxism. Well, you know, you can give it a Canadian bent and say that, you know, we're buying off people. Well, that's what the communists did. If you were bought off, you got sent to some gulag and died. You know, so you have a choice here. Now, I'm not saying that that's happening in Canada. No, we have no gulags, but you know, when you can basically buy your opposition off, then two things come to mind. How sleazy are these people? And there's probably good riddance from the opposition parties. If that's what you have sitting in your midst, you best clean house now. And I think you were saying
the former MP, Lisa Raitt, I think her name was, who basically said, you know, this is almost our come to Jesus moment here. Let's sit down. We know there's a huge Band-Aid on a hairy arm. let's rip it off.
Yeah.
If you guys are opportunists and you think you're going to do better on the other side of the floor because you're going to get shares in Brookfield, or you're going to get a cabinet post, or you're going to get go on all these trips and like Mr. Ma was front and center at the Chinese trip.
Yes.
Mr. Generou now, who's been given some fancy title, which means he probably makes more money. And if that's really all you're worried about is making the money, then let's if they get a majority, so be it. But the way that's going to work out, I would hope the way that's going to work out is the old political saying that governments are changed very, very much like you have to change the diapers on a baby. And we've gone through 4 elections with, if not a full diaper, it's got to be reaching capacity.
Well, anybody who watches our channel knows that we don't have a particular love affair with the current government. But at the same token, I'm losing a lot of my affection for the opposition leadership as well, because
I think
this fellow might be he's been palatable so far for me, in the sense that he says the right things, but he's not. If you've got these kind of rats in your team and you haven't been able to deal with them until they suddenly are exposed, then you might be photogenic and you might say all the right things, but you're really not the kind of leader I want to run the country, when you can't even run your own party. Because if you can't pick out the scumbags that are on your team, then maybe it's time for you to move on. Now look, the Conservatives had a really kind of a bad string of leadership since 2015. Let's face it, they've had 3 people in that space of time in charge, and yes, they've garnered more votes and they've garnered more seats, but they still haven't,
they haven't cracked the glass ceiling yet.
Yeah, well, and so I'm frankly, I think Mr. Polyev struck out with this. It's time to get another pitcher. Now, I know a lot of people will say you can't do that. He's got 87% of support of the party. Well, that didn't take you very far, because 2 weeks later, again we have another floor crosser, and I understand from some pundits on social media that there are a few more in the wings that are prepared to do this. So take that with a grain of salt. But if you got an opposition that can be bought off, it's not the opposition that I want to be associated with, or the principles of a team that can be bought off. Now, if the opposition is as corrupt as we sometimes see the government being, and unethical, then we really have a problem in this country, because
which goes back to, again, the same thing. We are now basically the third world banana republic of the West. And before some of the left-leaning people, I'm not talking third world in the sense that we don't have clean drinking water and we don't have medical care. We're talking political care. Mm-hmm. Where it's third world, where you stay in power because you control the resources, you shut off your opposition. I mean, we don't have to go back too far to a thing called the Freedom Convoy, where we found people who had put $10 into a fund to support the truckers having their bank accounts frozen.
Right.
We've had 2 court rulings to say that it was not
legal.
A legal use of that particular power. The threshold wasn't met. Nothing's been done.
No apologies.
Yeah.
We know what happened. The key players in that are all buggering off.
We still got one of the key players who's currently sitting in as the prime minister here, who was very vocal about that the Emergencies Act should be imposed to get rid of this.
Yeah.
We are now sending off one of our trade negotiators to Washington, who was very instrumental in the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So, and I don't know how this is going to fit in. As you mentioned, one of the other talking points with the U.S. Supreme Court now ruling that the tariffs are illegal, and we're sending down a bunch of people who are, to use what was it that Mr. Giovanni said about anti-Americanism and stuff.
Hissy fitters.
Yeah. So these are the people that are going to go down and try and negotiate a deal, which is, I think you're right. I think it's gone. The Supreme Court in the United States has said you want to impose tariffs, you do it country by country. You don't do it through multilateral agreements.
That's right. That's right. And I think that the Trump people were prepared for that. And as I saw this morning, the markets really didn't get too flustered about the ruling at all. Of course, we're going to have the elbows up crowd here in Canada going, "Oh, I told you so, told you so, Trump doesn't know what he's doing, blah, blah, blah." You'll get that. But it's not going to alter anything other than the courts now basically have told the administration that they're going to have to deal with country by country. You're not going to be able to do this blanket stuff based on the Emergency Act, which is what they did, which is the same sort of thinking that shut the truckers down. So the courts have said in the U.S. to the government, you don't have the right to do this unilaterally through the executive branch. You can do it if there's a war on or whatever, but you can't. There is no war, and you can't do it across the board with every country. So you got a real complication here for Canada, because that basically said the court said to Trump, you're going to have to deal with Canada and Peru and everybody else and all 198 countries or how many other in the UN, country by country. And what's disturbing for me is, apart from sending another bureaucrat to fight business people in Washington, because this woman has no more. She might be a great bureaucrat, but it's not bureaucrats we need to deal with on trade issues. Bureaucrats are just that, bureaucrats. They follow policy. Okay.
Yeah.
And
we've had a history of that in Canada, of putting people in. It goes back to Prime Minister Harper, who put in a civil service to lead the RCMP. Now,
exactly,
bold move,
but a dumb one.
Stupid move. Stupid move.
Stupid. Canada is obese as a political body, eating stupid, because really that's what we've been doing now for some time. What does a bureaucrat do? He signs MOUs. We got all this paperwork we've done and all this red tape. But what have you actually accomplished? Nothing. Okay. This ruling in the U.S. is going to basically turn that machinery that deals with trade and commerce into a mean fighting machine, point to point. And what most people will not talk about yet, or maybe they will, but certainly I haven't seen it this morning on any of our Canadian legacy media stations or the print media, is that a lot of treaties were actually signed under this blanket tariff thing that Trump brought out. So he will negotiate, yes, from here on in, nation to nation, but many have already signed treaties, have gone through the State Department routine, and they've actually put paper to pen to paper. Every time somebody shows up in the White House Oval Office and they sign this thing, they hand each other the folders. Those are done deals. So the done deal with the EU and the various countries that that's done. He's not going to negotiate with anybody on that one. That deal is meets the criteria. The ones that won't meet the criteria are the ones like Canada, like Mexico, where it was a blanket tariff. which dealt with everything that wasn't under the USMCA. Now, it's pretty clear that there will be no USMCA going forward. They're going to deal with us. And then we're going to be having to decide how we're going to deal with competition. We talked about this the last time.
Yeah.
All right. If Bell Media wants to compete with AT&T just in the mobile phone sector,
yeah.
we're not going to do that. No, we're going to hive that off. We're not interested. Is Saputo cheese? Are they going to compete with Wisconsin dairy? No, we're not going to do that. But we're going to. That's a sector. We're going to stop that. And I can go on with others as well, because we live in a country where everything is run by monopolies pretty well. We have very few competitive businesses in this country. Okay, the telecoms is an utter monopoly run by 3 outfits. The banking system, utter monopoly run by a handful of banks. The agriculture business run by and the grocery chain business run by a handful. There's no competition here.
No.
These are all going to be carved out groups, and we talked about this before many episodes ago about how we keep talking about competition, but we actually don't encourage competition because we want government to make the field level all the time. Competition doesn't work on that.
No.
You don't give a subsidy to one side of an industry to make them competitive, while the other side has to work their tail off to meet that competition.
Yeah.
But that's what we do here all the time. We favor through political largesse some of these industries, and over the decades, this whole business of being a monopoly and oligarchy run in the telecoms, in the banking, in the oil industry, you name it.
Yeah. We have a classic example out here, I think, Tom, on that. There was a company. Look it up on the internet. I don't know if we want to get involved in mentioning them or not.
No, you don't have to.
It's a company called Edison. And their big idea, which they had been floating for probably the last decade, is logging trucks that are run on completely electric motors. Now, you think, well, so what? Well, those logging trucks are usually diesel powered, fossil fuel bad, right?
Yeah, of course.
This particular company has said, the logs are coming from hills. So why don't we drive those trucks up empty on electric power, load them up, and when they're coming down the hill, we'll recharge the batteries.
Physics.
10 years or so, they've been on the go trying to get backing support. I understand that they've just opened up a plant in a part of the province here. But it has been a long slog for them. And you're thinking, well, is this because there aren't oligarchs from the Laurentide area that are thinking of this? Or, is it something that maybe Quebec should have done or Ontario should have done? And that's why you're just, you're part of that vast amount of space out in the West somewhere, who we really don't, other than perhaps in Edmonton now that we've got a scumbag across the floor, and that's probably a pretty good place. But and you mentioned, right? I mean, did the U.S. courts do this? Was the U.S. Government under President Trump aware that that was what was going to happen? Are we playing a game of marbles when the U.S. is playing 3D chess? Sometimes it seems to think of that. The long-term thought, if we're looking at even in Asia, when you're looking at the Chinese, they're generations ahead on what they're thinking. And as we've mentioned many times in our broadcast here, all the government has to do is get past that 7 seconds of a goldfish's memory span, and everything seems to disappear here in Canada. So, we're not even behind the 8 ball here. I think we're still trying to climb up off the floor to find the 8 ball on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, well, the thing that I find problematic these days in Canada is over the decade or so, we've become terribly introspective on just about everything. We've got this movement here that we become in many ways like Americans have become or have been accused of being and not knowing anything outside their own country. And we become just like them because I talk to people and I find they don't know anything about anything anymore. They know about stuff that they saw on the CBC or heard on some, or read in something like Maclean's or on social media, which a lot of it is driven by AI now. Because I think I told you the other day I watched a thing on YouTube about how Carney was in Washington and basically read the riot act to Trump, and I thought, what are you talking about? And this was done so well by an AI producer that it I thought, when did Trump?
On a quick glance, you would think, boy, that's true.
Well, I was astonished. This went on for 30 minutes. I mean, and it was well done, but it was complete fantasy. Okay. But the problem is that that 10 years of introspection and constant harangue over Trump and the United States and whatever is turned us into a kind of a bubble of dummies here that can't see past their nose. We know nothing about the outside world, like, in a way we used to. They keep talking about we have to diversify. Well, they've done everything but diversify in the last 10 years. Everything's been, what do we know inside? We don't want to talk to the Americans. We want to solve our own problems. And we got all these things we're going to do inside. And we can be better than anybody else because we've got the best talent. And we're making up talent that doesn't exist. We made up
we
talent.
know that out here.
Well, look at the DEI, if you will, is the kind of talent we've got in government. We've got him in industry. We've got him in everywhere, and we seem to think that that's what the rest of the world is like. But if you ask people, ordinary folks, about sort of current events outside of the Canada-U.S. bubble, they're looking at you like you're the man from the moon. I have neighbors who've just got back from Cuba. They took the second last flight out of that godforsaken country on Monday. This is Thursday. No, this is Friday. They were on the second last flight. So you won't believe how that place is in deep trouble. Well, yeah, if you have a country that's got no energy, that country's in deep trouble. But, why would you go there? Didn't you know that this is a very poor, sanctioned country for the last 20 years? Like, it's nothing new. But no, Canada, we're going to go there because we have relations with these countries. Well, okay, fine. But when it goes south, you're on your own, pal. And that's what's happened. And
that again, that kind of opens up a can of worms and a sore spot for me. It goes back to the changes in citizenship laws that we had here because of an incident that happened in Beirut, where we had all of a sudden 20,000 Canadians who demanded to be removed from Beirut, who had never even, they would be lucky if they could spell Canada, if and find it on a map. But because they had this magic ocean, they could call on the government to bring them home. Well, home, and how many of the people that were in Beirut are actually still in Canada now? Probably a big goose egg. Now, the same thing is here with this whole thing with the people that, well, I'm not going to go to Palm Springs. I'm not going to go to Phoenix. I'm not going to go to Yuma. I'm not going to go to, a lot of them were people that wouldn't have gone there anyway. but they're going to go to Mexico, which is fine until, they get into a situation perhaps where a cartel takes over the region, or, then it's up to the Canadian government to get them home. Oh, I went to Cuba, for a nice winter vacation. But now the government's got to bail me out because I can't get home. I'm sorry, that's not really the way it should work. Um, and I guess maybe that's part and parcel of what we've done. We've become very used to, as you said near the beginning of the broadcast, we want the government to control us, and we're quite happy to let them tell us what's good, what's bad, and what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And, oh, gee, it's, 12 o'clock in our time here. So, I better sign on to the CBC and find out what I'm supposed to have for lunch.
Well, the manipulation of the population begins with, making sure, as Marshall McLuhan said, a Canadian, the medium is the message. And the Trudeau regime has very successfully morphed into the Carney regime, which has bought off the media. We don't have a free press, so hence you don't have really any alternative voice in the sort of the mainstream media telling you, well, no, everything you're told is not quite correct. And one of the cute little clips that we spoke about earlier in the pre-production was Rosemary Barton of the CBC with the open mic issue just this week, where it was proven that everything they do there is made up. She said so herself. Well, we know that CBC in particular is lock, stock, and barrel, nothing more than a state organ. And you don't work there unless you, play the company tune. That's just fine if you want to live in a Marxist state. Okay, Prov to Canada. I don't want to do that. But the trouble is that the competition in the broadcast media, and then in the print media, and in the advertising media has been subsidized by the same people who pay 100% of the CBC. So now what are you going to do if you've got a company that is, barely making it? You will take the subsidy, and you're going to be really careful not to bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
All right. And that is unethical. I don't want to read your newspaper if all you're going to do is regurgitate some press release from the PMO. Okay. Because you're not worth my time. But yet this same bunch is trying to come up with legislation that stops people from you and I having this chat on social media, because it might not be what they want people to hear from two old guys like us.
Well, that's true. And wasn't it just the infamous Mark Miller, who had his fingers in so many portfolios that have all managed to go south, talking about that we really can't believe all these, I'll call them, my words, fringe outlets, because you're not getting the truth from them. Well,
no.
So, define truth. Is that what you tell me I'm supposed to believe? Isn't that 1984-ish double speak?
Well, that's truth is replaced by words, the wordsmiths, misinformation, malinformation. You're either telling me the truth or you're lying to me. This is binary for me. That's why I never use those words, because I think these are made up words from the woke era, where you just make stuff up, like gun person a couple of days ago. This is so Canadian, this is just beyond the pale. But it's the same as when you come out with a policy and you say it over and over again, and now suddenly it's reality in this country. For example, we're going to build 500,000 houses. Well, they haven't built 500,000 houses. It would take 10 years to build 500,000 houses. But what they really want to do in this country is start up housing that's run by the government, which makes you a renter, because that's all they want you to do. They don't want you to own property anymore. They want you to be on leased land. Or okay, yeah, you'll own that box that they built for you, but you really don't own it. You're renting it from the guy that built it, which is the federal government or the provincial government. Needless to say, no one's building these places because you still have to come up with gazillions of dollars to build the number of houses that these people are talking about in a country that mortgage rates haven't gone anywhere, particularly south.
Yeah.
Just go north, and we're in a competitive world where opportunity and money goes where it pays dividends. Okay, whether it's a job or whether it's a real return on your investment. Hence, we have hundreds of millions of dollars every month leaving Canada, investing from by investors, primarily in the U.S. and other places, because it's not coming here.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we've also got that, a simple thing. What does it take to plant a tree? Basically, a shovel and a supply of seedlings. And our former illustrious leader,
I mean, the Idiot King.
Yeah, him. What was he going to do? 2 million trees or 2 billion trees he was going to plant?
Trees. Yeah.
Whatever. Even if it was 2
Astronomical
million
number.
trees,
Yes.
we couldn't even get that done. Surely to goodness, we had high school students that you could have given a shovel to and a bag of seedlings and sent them to some place to plant trees on a, Canada Council Works grant or something. We've got a group of people here who, if they were in a soggy paper bag with a machete, couldn't fight their way out of it.
No, they'd be hitting each other with it.
I keep going back that we have managed to slip into almost like a Keystone Cops kind of thing here with you can't get anything done because you're fighting yourself half the time.
Well, they being the pundits who are obsessed with Trump and whatever, went after Giovanni as being a traitor because he really just said what everybody knew, is that we have a large portion of the population here that has been throwing a hissy fit now for the last number of years over Trump. And one of the things that I was wanting to chat today about is what happens when that boogeyman's gone. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to invent another one? Because this one is really stupid. They keep talking. We're going to have an election, and it's all going to be about Trump. Well, okay. And when at what ballot does he show up on so I can vote against him? I'm this obsession with him, and curiously, it didn't stop during the Biden era either, because the anti-American bullshit was continuing right through the Democrat era, the 4 years of Joe Biden's reign. And by the way, the border wasn't any less functional between Canada and the U.S. during their reign than it is now. If anybody wanted to, we take a close look at that. So,
I guess that's one point too. That maybe the only thing that's different is that in the United States they have people looking at the laws that are on their books that they can use. We've never, ever been exempt from being examined going into the United States.
No,
we have never, ever at any point been told that, well, if you got a criminal record, you can still come in because you're kind of like us anyway.
Yeah.
Not the case. I read the other day that, there's now a big push for people who are on the Nexus program, the trusted traveler. That Canada should get out of that and develop our own. Well, let's just go back to a thing called ArriveCan. We couldn't even manage that,
Well, we touched upon this in our last broadcast, and if they're messing with that, then they're clearly messing with other things too. But I want to know whose fingerprints are on this, because at the moment, one of the classic examples of a authoritarian regime is you put out little feelers, or you put out little signals of what you might be doing, and people start getting used to that idea, and that to me is telling of what's going on here. But look, I saw carnage in Surrey just last Tuesday. Was it there?
Yesterday, I think.
Yesterday. Sorry, yeah, I keep thinking it's Thursday. I don't know why, but yesterday, yes. And he was waxing eloquently about how we have to remove people who shouldn't be here, and that we should stop people from messing about with the refugee program, and and using it as a way to get out of being removed because they're criminals. And I'm thinking, where the hell were you a year ago? And where
Well,
was your idiot pal, the king, the idiot king, for the last 10 years? I mean, come on.
coupled with that, didn't the government vote down the conservative motion to amend that?
Yes,
So,
they did.
come on, folks. I know our attention span isn't large,
No, it's
but
very short.
come on. You've got one guy talking about doing things that they as a government have just voted down. At what point do you really believe these people?
Well, how do you put these ideas into your brain and try to bring them to some sort of logical explanation? And on the one hand, you have the prime minister in your town talking about this issue of making sure that we fix the immigration refugee program, which they screwed up. Now, the thing they screw up, they're going to fix, but there's no legislation on the books to do it at the moment. Yet the very person who's in charge of that comes up with this harebrained scheme of having the Canadian Foreign Legion show up here, because that's what she's talking about. We're gonna import thousands of foreign military personnel who are experienced that we need in Canada to build up our armed forces. Now,
well, and that's on top of the millions that are already here that we don't know who they are anyway, and we have a housing problem. We've got a food bank problem. We've got a healthcare problem, and we want to bring in more people.
We did bring in more people. There are 34% more people in Canada now than there were 10 years ago. We don't know where the hell they came from.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's be serious here. When I hear some of the folks, whistleblowers, this has been documented. People can Google it if they like, where people aren't even asked any questions on their refugee claim. Just say you're a refugee and we'll come back to you when we have time. Like that's where we've got.
Go and fill out your application. Self-fill out your
yeah, that's right.
claim application.
Yeah, Refugees Are Us is a new app in Canada.
Yeah, well, that's coupled with the fact too, and I don't know whether it was before a parliamentary committee where they basically said that in the summer you've got students who get 3 weeks of training making decisions.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. Listen, the incompetence. And look, in a DEI country, a post-nation state that we live in, you want to make sure that the results are predictable. If you're going to put incompetent people in who will do what they're told, the results will be predictable. So if you want, in the case of an immigration or refugee program, that you want to flood the place with people who shouldn't be here, you basically make sure that the people who are doing the so-called screening are as dumb as a sack of bricks and will do what they're told. Okay. And you're going to fill up the place. And then you're going to say, we got the desired results. Okay. Because you've pre-programmed this thing. And that's where we're at. Now, if you subscribe to the notion that that's good for Canada, then okay, prove it to me. But I've not seen any evidence of that at all. But then again, I'm just an old guy who's watched this thing over 50 years, literally spin out of control.
Yeah, we didn't realize when we were boy immigration officers that we had what do they call that? We got the like a Trojan horse. We didn't know there was a Trojan horse virus sitting in our whole program. And it's just starting to come into fruition now.
Yeah. Well, no, but listen, Bob, no one wants to hear war stories from us because they don't believe it anyway. They're not going to want to listen to the fact that we watched this thing go to pieces in the last. They don't want to hear that. Okay. Even some of our contemporaries don't want to hear that because they go, well, things are different now, Tom. This is a new world. Geopolitics has changed. The environment's changed. We have to deal with climate change. We have to deal with tariffs. We have to deal with China. We have to deal
And
with
rising oceans.
in a multipolar world and blah blah blah. Yeah, but why is it that I go in the grocery store and I got to put stuff back on the shelf? Is that how things have changed? What are you talking about? And these are people our age. I got to tell you right now that we represent in the boomer crowd probably a minuscule percentage of people whose brain function is still working, because some of the stuff I hear and read from our generation is astonishingly stupid. You would have thought that somehow along the way, wisdom and experience and common sense would have been fortified. No, quite the opposite. I'm sorry. And I feel badly for anybody between 15 and 35, because I didn't do this to you. All right. And I'm not the one that wants you to be a renter, and I'm not the one that invented the Foreign Legion of Canada, and I'm not the one that thinks that you should be beholden to some oligarch for your telephone and so on. But hey,
Well, you mentioned we what is it called? The event horizon, the black swan, it's all just looming out there. And I have no idea what is going to trigger. We're seeing, I don't know, my opinion anyway, we're seeing that inanity of the government. Like, let's just bring in a bunch of people to be our arm. Now, these are going to be people that, probably will just self-claim at the border and fill out the fact that they're refugees, but they want to be part of the military because that's fast track. We have no idea who they are, but we're going to train them to be killers and we're going to give them guns. Now, what could possibly go wrong with that?
so apparently we don't have enough cannon fodder in the country. We're going to import it. Come on. This is so, even us having this conversation is stupid, because it's just stupid. I'm at a loss for words. I want to meet the morons that thought this was a good idea. But then I listened to this woman who pretends to be the Minister of Immigration. Like I said, a bag of bricks has a higher IQ than this woman has on this subject.
There we go. Sorry, folks, just had a quick interruption.
Nah, no worries. So you were going on about the
the inanity. Maybe we are one of those people that our brain cells are forgetting things.
Oh gosh.
It doesn't really matter. We were on a rant of some sort.
Here.
We were on a rant of some sort anyway, but
it's what happens when you're so deep into it. Yeah. All right. Well, long and the short of it, I think we've pretty well covered. Like I said, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again,
expecting different results, and it hasn't happened in the last 4 elections.
That's right. And so we'll have to watch to see how. Look, let's predict something easy. In the next 10 to 15 days, all hell's going to break loose in the Middle East. You can make book on that, because I don't think the Iranians are going to. Oh, by the way, for Canadians who don't know where Iran is, that's in the Middle East or West Asia, depending on which geography you want to use. And the slaughter of Iranians by the autocratic, theocratic government there apparently is not sitting well with our American pals, so they're going to try and fix that. So that'll be interesting. it will have an impact far greater than the craziness that is being foisted on us with things like the Canadian Foreign Legion to be buttressing the Canadian Armed Forces with, mean, lean fighting machine types.
Yes, that and the self-selection immigrant class, self-selected refugee class, the make sure you tick all the box bureaucrats, I'm sorry, I know people get upset when we start mentioning about being third world because in their minds they're thinking third world means that we don't have proper drinking water and starving people but this is what it is. We've got a government in control right now that wants to maintain its power, much like what was that guy's name in Africa? Idi Amin,
Pol
Baby
Pot,
Doc Duvalier,
guy with the
Pinochet.
mustache.
There's been a whole whack of people, and we're slowly slipping into that.
Well, yeah, I think I call it the maple syrup socialism, which is shifting to something more insidious, because the maple syrup socialism was okay. We had the healthcare system, which everybody kind of thought was okay, but is not really okay anymore. We have the pension and the social security system, which used to be okay, which really isn't okay anymore. It's these are all things that were okay 15, 20, 30 years ago, but now have not been updated, upgraded, whatever euphemism you want to use. And in fact, what they're being manipulated into is even more control, more influence by bureaucrats in day-to-day life, the centralization of power constantly, which is the precursor to a communist system. That's when they decide how many cars we're going to import or buy of a certain guy. That's what they did back in the Soviet era. They said we're going to build 2,459 green tractors. Okay. Any buyers for that? No, but we build. Okay, and so that's kind of the way we're headed here with this sort of we are going to have our finger in every pot, and there's only two places in this country at the moment where people are going, I don't think so. Our friends in Alberta and our friends in Quebec. Now, hopefully, they can push enough buttons that this move towards this central planning socialist nirvana is sidelined somehow. But my fear is that they will overshoot the runway, and they will say bonsoir in Quebec and adios in Alberta.
Yeah. Yeah. And like it or lump it, that's really the way it's going. And, the fact that we've got that politician in Edmonton now is just fueling the fire. If any more decide to cross the floor, it's going to stoke it even more. Even here in BC, there's a talk of get a BC out of Confederation move. So
yeah, but you guys are going to go broke anyway. I mean, the guy just passed a budget. You can't possibly meet the receipts for that.
No.
Where are you going to get that money from? And by the way, what happens when all the so-called First Nations decide that, well, we own all this property, but we don't owe you any money on it? Like, how's that going to work? You created one unholy mess. Not you, but the leadership there, and the folks who basically are ill-educated is the only way I can call them, and still get away with it here on YouTube. You're driving the place into the ditch, and you don't need help from Ottawa for that. Let me tell you.
Oh, God no. But anyway, our rant is running out of steam. I think we have to take a breather and some.
Well, let's see how the hockey game goes. We lost against the American girls team. Congratulations to them.
Congratulations to the American hockey women.
That was a
fantastic game.
that was a, what do you call it, fairy tale ending, and good for them. And our girls,
You got nothing to be ashamed of.
nothing
No.
whatsoever.
Nothing at all.
So now, in a day or so, we'll be watching the boys, and we're rooting for our guys. So
Whatever
good on you.
happens, happens.
And we'll know next Friday when we come back whether we should be. Well, the girls lost, so it's half empty now, and maybe if the boys win, it'll be half full.
Maybe. You never know.
I just don't want to have it completely empty.
Well, there is that possibility,
There is.
and we have to be prepared for that. I know for the average person, that's going over the 7-second goldfish memory, but you've
Right.
heard it here first. We're hoping for a 50% grasp on the gold. But if we end up with 2 silvers, don't lose a nut over it.
No. If you have one. I won't go there.
No, we better not.
Don't forget to hit the like button.
Yeah,
If you're
subscribe,
watching
buy
us
some
on-
coffee. You know,
If you're watching us on Rumble, we can now be helped out there. Just hit the contribute button. We apparently have a dime in it. Can you believe it? A whole dime. Let's not spend it in one place.
No,
So
we're getting there
we're getting there.
eventually.
That's right. If this was a little disjointed. By the way, there'll be a little break in the middle of this one. I'll fix it, Bob. Not to worry.
Yeah, well, that was where I had my my massive brain forgetfulness.
Okay.
All right.
Talk to you later.
You betcha.
Canada